If the reports are correct, then it'll only be able to use this weapon, will only be able to use within pretty restricted terms and conditions in the Kursk region, to help the Ukrainians hold that territory. So, as I said, they're then negotiating from the strongest position possible if, as is likely, there are peace talks or surrender talks as soon as the new president is inaugurated.
President Biden has signalled a major shift in US policy, authorising the first use of American-supplied long-range missiles by Ukraine for strikes deep inside Russia. Iain Martin, we've been talking about this a bit this morning on the show. Is the sense here of just Joe Biden doing as much as possible, as fast as possible, before Donald Trump gets in and reverses all of it?
Yes, I think that's pretty much what's happening, and it's clear now that with hindsight, that the Biden administration did not want to do anything in the election, during the election campaign, which would suggest that they were ramping up the American effort in the war in case it became an election issue in a race that they expected to be close. So the Ukrainians have been very, very frustrated for the last 2-3 months, well, longer than that actually, at America not giving them the go-ahead on this stuff. I see already that some of the president-elect's surrogates are out being absolutely furious about it. For example, David Sachs, the tech millionaire or billionaire, saying that this is a massive escalation by Biden and that he is trying to leave Donald Trump with the worst possible inheritance. Well, no, actually, what he's trying to do is to give the Ukrainians a chance of negotiating from the strongest position possible. And that's kind of pretty obvious. Ukraine is, well, still, last time I checked, an ally of America that's been helped. But will it make a massive difference? It still comes with strings attached, and it can, if the reports are correct, then it'll only be able to use this weapon, will only be able to use within pretty restricted terms and conditions in the Kursk region, to help the Ukrainians hold that territory. So, as I said, they're then negotiating from the strongest position possible if, as is likely, there are peace talks or surrender talks as soon as the new president is inaugurated.
Laura, where does this leave us in Britain? Because one expectation would be that you'd have people like Britain and France now following suit and basically giving permission for our own weapons to be used in a similar fashion, which I believe hasn't quite happened yet. But then if Trump immediately reverses this when he gets in, that leaves us quite exposed, right?
Yeah, I think it will be a very interesting question if that does happen, because I mean, on Starmer's way over to Rio, he's there for the G20. At the moment, he stressed multiple times to reporters that supporting Ukraine was the kind of chief objective for that meeting, for that summit, and actually, this announcement from Biden, or rather the reports of this authorization, come at a time when actually Starmer was slightly distancing himself from Olaf Scholz, of course, the German chancellor, after he spoke to President Putin. So there was a sense of slight fracturing of that question, and indeed at least some awkwardness around that. So I think probably quite good for the Ukrainians that you have these reports when you do. Of course, it will be interesting to see whether Starmer, at a point at which he is desperate to avoid a wider trade conflict as Trump comes in, that possible impact of tariffs, is able to kind of stand up to President Trump when he is inaugurated over this question of Ukraine. I think very few could say accurately what will happen in that situation, and we'll just have to wait.
Iain, this is a conflict you've obviously covered closely and written a lot about. How are you feeling about it at the moment? Are you feeling quite depressed about the Western, the sort of ebbing Western effort? I mean, you've written as much.
Yeah, I feel.
You wrote, in fact, that Trump's election was basically a betrayal of Ukraine, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, it's Trump, so you never know. There's obviously going to be a tension within the administration, so let's see how all that resolves itself. And it's not implausible, as it's been put to me by people in Washington, that Trump ends up being more robust or offers Putin a peace deal, which then the Russians don't accept the terms, and that then ends up annoying the administration. So let's see. It's certainly going to be a difficult conflict to end in 24 hours. But yes, I feel more broadly that we in Europe have missed our opportunity to step up. Europe the UK, France, and the other sort of leading powers in European defence have had 2 years to prepare for this moment. There was always at least a 50-50 chance that the next president was going to be an America First president and maybe Donald Trump. And that some countries like Poland have dramatically increased their defence spending, but not enough of us have. And we haven't given Ukraine sufficient tools to actually to fight properly. We've given them about half. We've given them a lot, but about half of what we need. And the concern now must be that Europe is just divided. You know, that Germany is now clearly moving into a political cycle where it will want to get out of the war and make the war go away. French politics is something of a mess. Britain wants to be supportive of Ukraine, but it's unclear precisely where we'll end up because of how does Starmer then end up reading the Trump administration. So I just feel on behalf of the people who are actually really in the middle of this, which is the Ukrainians who fought so bravely and are a sovereign country that's been invaded. And I think history shows us it's not going to work out well, either for them or for us longer term, if appeasement wins.
I mean, I'm not going to ask you to sort of peer into a crystal ball, but if, as people assume, Donald Trump either curtails or limits US involvement in this war, and does not successfully manage to force them to negotiate a peace deal, what happens then? Do you think? Do you think that Europe does step up, and this really does become a sort of de facto Europe versus Russia war, or do you think eventually Europe kind of buckles too?
I think Europe probably buckles. I mean, I say that with great regret. I've had this conversation many times in the last year, 18 months with policymakers. And when I make the case, look, it should be feasible for a continent of 500 million people, if you include the UK, that has Britain and France in it, that has an economy that is 10 times at least the size of Russia's economy. It should be possible for Europe to support Ukraine. But for the reasons that I mentioned, the division, the split within Europe, where you now have effectively some pro-Russian governments or governments which have parties within their coalitions that have a history of wanting to get the show back on the road with the Russians. I think it's going to then be very difficult to organise. What seems most likely, if there's a peace deal, is that Trump will demand that European countries help police that deal. So let's see what that looks like. That'll be a really difficult task. But he's not then going to say, there's peace in Europe, therefore I give up my demands for Europe to spend more on defence, which he's right about. He's likely to say, right, okay, well, I've created this amazing peace deal, the world's greatest ever peace deal.
Now
you're going to police it, and now you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I want 3% of spending of GDP spent on defence as the new norm, not 2% or 2.5%. That's what I would suggest we're heading for.